All right, welcome everyone. Tonight is our next in the series on the major arcana. We're going to be talking about High Priestess. So this series is generally based on some writings from Paul Foster Case. This Tarot Fundamentals in the BOTA curriculum. FLO also has a Tarot Fundamentals series based on an open source or public domain version of his series. And of course, both of those are available. BOTA, you can get the BOTA version. FLO, through the Thinkific site, you can get the FLO version. And of course, there's a summary of some of this material in the threshold lessons as well. So first, let me give you a look at the tarot key we'll be discussing tonight, the High Priestess. Always interesting, this key. So I've got the 4 color schemes built into this. I call them my personal little mantras. But you'll notice the silver and blue themes that are parallel in the image itself. So we're going to talk about the usual sorts of things we talk about with this key. We're going to talk about the idea of the subconscious mind, the Hebrew letter, which is Gimel, the number on the tarot key, the astrological association with the moon, memory, the uniting intelligence in the Sefer Yetzirah is linked with this key, and then we'll talk a little bit about the tarot symbolism. So Case says this key is associated with the subconscious mind or below conscious awareness. So the subconscious mind really came into modern conversation with Freud, and it really is the basis of psychoanalysis and modern psychology. We've come to learn quite a bit about the subconscious, and I guess first and foremost, it tends to be amenable to suggestion, whether you're trying to or not commonly. It tends to respond to images. The thinking is that the unconscious mind developed before the conscious critical mind or the conscious self-conscious mind. And so it tends to be very responsive to pre-linguistic suggestions, images. It tends to use deductive rather than inductive reasoning, which lends itself to a certain problem. There's a phrase used in computer science called GIGO, or garbage in, garbage out. And so the problem is that because the unconscious mind doesn't analyze and critically think about the suggestions that you give to it, if you give it very negative or bad suggestions or poorly thought out suggestions, it'll run with it. And so the only way to counter that really is to use your conscious mind to think about the suggestions you're giving, and then make a conscious attempt to give better suggestions. And of course, one of the things we know is the unconscious mind governs bodily activities. So that really is one of the most profound things for purposes of esoteric symbolism, is because the unconscious mind governs bodily activities. When you learn how to give appropriate suggestions to the unconscious mind, a whole host of opportunities open themselves, including increasing your ability to self-heal, increasing your ability to heal others through prayer or through mystical practices, including your ability to tap into sources of information that wouldn't otherwise be readily available. Let's talk a little bit about the Hebrew letter. The Hebrew letter here is Gimel. So the ancient form of the letter meant a bow. It also means, when it's spelled out as a word, camel. And there's the Hebrew spelling there. The letters of the word Gimel, when using gematria, sum to 73. So sometimes we can peek at other words summing to 73 and see if we get any interesting hits. So that's what I've done here. 73 is the number of Chokmah, wisdom. Also the Hebrew word for thy father, again associated with wisdom. Chesa, to seek protection, to take refuge, to trust. Yod, Tuv, day of feast or day of good. The Hebrew word for the power of formation or power of the substance of Ma. And Ka'eben, like a stone. And then also the I is a Hebrew letter, a particular reference to ayin, and a triangle, the number 3. And so the I in the triangle is suggesting a certain sort of wisdom connected with this path. There are also some gematria hits using Latin gematria for 73, which I thought I'd mention. It's the number of ad altiora, to higher things, as well as ivbilate, to rejoice. Let's also look quickly at the number on the tarot key, the number 2. 2 is the number of duplication, repetition, wisdom and science, opposition, polarity, sequence. A line has 2 points connected, makes a line, and also separation, because a line demarcates 2 sides. And there's also the idea of subordination, and of course, subconsciousness. Astrologically, this key is associated with the moon. The moon, in terms of ancient cosmologies, the Greek and Roman figures were Diana and Artemis. She was a goddess of the hunt, and particularly associated with archery, and undoubtedly that's related to the moon, and in some of its phases looks like a giant bow in the sky. So said to be the daughter of Jupiter and Latona, and she was the twin sister of Apollo, Apollo being the god of the sun. So the god of the moon and the god of the sun, makes sense they would be related. Known for strength and athletic grace. Also known as an emblem of chastity. So again, associated with the moon. The moon rules the sign of Cancer, and the exaltation is in Taurus, the bull. So Cancer, and I guess it's the 4th house, deals with the mother, the household, and also in terms of parts of the body, the mammary glands. And so kind of the unconscious gestation in the mother, all that's associated with Cancer. And so the moon governs all of that. The exaltation is said to be in Taurus. Taurus is associated with intuition. And the idea is that the moon finds its highest expression when it is a conduit in Taurus in the function of intuition, where through the unconscious mind, we connect with a higher source of wisdom. Remember all those connections with Hokmah and the Divine Father? The idea is connecting to that divine wisdom and having it transmit through the unconscious mind into the personal awareness. That's thought to be the highest expression of the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind is associated with memory, and that's hinted at in the picture here with the scroll. The scroll is basically a written memory or recording of things that have gone past. In terms of how to make the most of our ability to remember things, those ideas are sort of lumped together in this key. One way the unconscious mind works is through association. Repetition or frequency also helps us remember things. Remembering that things are similar, that can help us remember, but also opposites or contrasts can help us remember as well. That idea of sort of processing things, it's like this, but opposite to that. That idea of processing things also helps us to make a firm mental impression, and the firmer or clearer the mental impression is, the more likely we are to remember it later on. In terms of insights from the Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formation, Kay says the 13th path is called the Uniting Intelligence, or Conductive Intelligence of Unity, because it is the essence of glory and the perfection of the truths of spiritual unities. All of these statements are designed to make you go, So they oftentimes require a great deal of meditation in order to make sense of them, but that's the idea of it. So one of the ways that we can help unravel the meanings of these phrases is through looking at the Hebrew words and applying gematria. So the Hebrew term is Sechel Manahig Ha'akruth, or a driver or leader of the unities. Those letters sum to 882, which is the word for Hebrews, Hebrew. So I'm guessing that Hebrews, the 12 tribes together form the Hebrews, and thus it's a sense of the unity of the Hebrews. Let's look a little bit against the symbolism in the tarot key. Obviously, key 2 is the high priestess. The high priestess is the chief feminine elder, suggests a certain sort of wisdom and authority. Each of the double letters in the Hebrew language associated with one of the planets is associated with a pair of opposites. And so the pair of opposites for this key are peace and strife. The idea being that if your unconscious mind is in a state of peace, then your personality will be as well. But if there are strong conflicts between your unconscious emotions and your conscious choices, then that will create rippling waves or strife. It is also said to be associated with alchemical symbol. Is that not what I said? Alchemical silver? Alchemical silver is a symbol. How about that? It is a symbol of aspects within us, and in particular, one of the currents. There's a lunar current and a solar current, and I think they're referring to the lunar current here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the specific symbols. We have the crown. The crown is silver to suggest phases of the moon, also suggesting periodicity, reflection, and reproductive power. We have the cross in the middle of her chest. That's a link to Saturn, the Great Mother. Also elements in balanced disposition, and a link to Hecate, goddess of magic in 3 phases, also hinted at again by the crown. The pomegranates are a female symbol for the 10 Sephiroth, yet a male color red to symbolize union of opposites. The palms are the opposite. They are a male shape, yet female color, to symbolize masculine paths connecting the Sephiroth. The pillars are, let's see, getting ahead of myself. The pillars are the same pillars from King Solomon's temple, Jachin and Boaz. Notice that they are both similar in shape and yet contrasting in color. The lotus buds are to suggest the potential of the unconscious mind, yet not yet fully realized. The cube that she sits on, the cube is because it looks 6 faces around the cube, all the same, and so it implies truth. It's also a symbol for the earth. Salt is associated with earth, and salt forms in cubes. The blue watery robe implies the root matter that is said to compose everything, the prakriti or mind stuff. And then finally, the scroll suggests memory or knowledge. Written on the scroll is the word Torah. Torah is a reference to law, and refers to the laws of consciousness, which the unconscious mind follows. It also is a reference to the 7 Hermetic laws. Those of you who have read the Kabbalion, the Kabbalion talks about these 7 laws. They are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Again, if you haven't read the Kabbalion, that's a great place to learn about. Let's also talk about one of Case's favorite topics, the tarot tableau, where we have the Fool up top, and then we have the rest of the major arcana broken into 7 columns of 3. With the top row corresponding to a principle, the middle row to a law or agency, and then the lowest row to a stage of spiritual unfoldment. So Case says this second column is, he calls it awakening. And basically he says knowledge of the unconscious mind, as taught by the adepts using the law of response, leads eventually to a spiritual awakening. Once you start changing the suggestions and take advantage of these laws of the unconscious mind, eventually you get a spiritual awakening. It looks a little unpleasant to begin with down there in the tower, but it's that awakening is the truth. To quote the words of Jesus, it's the truth that sets you free once you get past an incomplete understanding of reality and go to a better one. It invariably ends up giving you a better life, a better picture of what's really going on. The more you understand, the more freedom you have, the more ability you have to shape your circumstances. Let's talk about the position of this key on the tree of life. So Gimel connects Kether to Tiferet. It's right up there in the top part of the tree. It leads from the ego center in Tiferet to a consciousness of unity up in the crown chakra. The moon is also connected with Yesod, and the 9th Sephira associated with the 2-9 grade. So it deals with air and the lower astral world. All of those Sephiroth in the middle deal in some form or fashion with consciousness. Hebrew, of course, it means foundation and is the sphere of the moon. And it refers to the personal subconscious mind. But just as in the tarot key, we have the woman figure in front of the veil, what we see hinted behind the veil is an ocean, what Jung would refer to as the collective unconscious that connects literally to everything, all the way up to that central mind of divinity at the top of the tree of life. So we begin our journey from the physical world upwards to these higher realms through the administrative or serving intelligence. And then it connects us into the personal unconscious, which then opens doors further up the tree for us. So it literally is the key of everything in terms of mystical awareness. And that's why it's associated with this awakening stage, is because once we begin to master the laws and follow the patterns and give appropriate suggestions, it eventually leads to that awakening. On the cube of space, which is another way of piecing all of these parts together, again, it's one of the double letters attributed to one of the 7 ancient planets. And in this case, it's on the bottom of the cube, representing the unconscious mind. One of the things you can do with tarot keys is divination. So if you get this card into divination and it's well aspected, it suggests secrets, mystery. The future is yet unrevealed. A woman who enters the querent, if you're a man, the querent herself, if you're female. Wisdom or sacred knowledge. Now, reversed or poorly aspected, it can suggest passion, moral or physical ardor, conceit, or surface knowledge. In other words, it can suggest you're not digging beneath the surface and you don't understand what's deeper in the pool, so to speak. One of the fun things I've been doing is placing these tarot keys in film. And so I thought for an example of the High Priestess in film, the character Solitaire in the James Bond movie Live and Let Die. I think the Beatles recorded a song that goes with that as well. But she looks like that, of course. Helpfully posing. Actually, it's a different key, but it's similar. The title is right. The key is wrong. But that's the idea. Is she was this mystical figure who was the expert at cards and could connect to everything and figure out what was going on. Of course, one of the other things that we can do as students is use the keys for meditational purposes. And so when we use the High Priestess for meditational purposes, we can use it to enhance memory. You need to study for a test and you need to really remember some stuff. Great way to start is meditating on key 2. It can enhance psychism and receptivity to higher guidance as well. All right, and with that, I'll leave you again with an image of the High Priestess.